Today we're going to start making our observations of a particular text. We are going to start with Acts 1:8, and I hope this is a familiar verse for you. It says, "And you will receive power, and the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Judea, and Samaria, and even to the remotest parts of the earth." So we're going to start by making observations. We're going to look at terms, especially key terms, but we're going to really look at every word. We are going to look at terms. We're going to look at grammar. And we're going to look at, within our grammar, we're going to look at subjects and verbs. We're going to also look at things that are contrasting. You're going to look for cause and effect. So, real quick, just to demonstrate. So we have here is a contrast. And we're going to look here. You is a subject, will receive power. Will receive is a verb. And we're going to ask, what is our tense? It is future. And we're going to ask questions, good W questions, and the H. The what, where, who. We're going to ask what, where, who, and when, and how. So we're going to look at terms, and we're going to look at grammar, but we're also never study a passage in isolation. Always look at the context. So we need to know who is our author, who is our speaker, who is you. So if this is Acts chapter 1, verse 8, read verses chapter 1, verse 1 through 7 to get the preceding context. And then read verses 9 through the end of the paragraph. I think that's verses 9 and 10. And get the full picture of what's happening here. So you have your context. And as you go along in your context, make those observations. For instance, here's some of my observations from this passage of Acts chapter 1, verses 1 through 10. This, we see here, the first account I composed. So who is I? I is Luke, right? And he is writing to Theophilus. So this is the first account. So this is a sequel. That's what we learned here. This is a sequel. This is the sequel to Luke's gospel. He wrote that account also to Theophilus. And he gives here the subject, the main reason he wrote both of these books, so that he could communicate to Theophilus all that Jesus began to do and to teach. In our passage of verse 8 that we're observing today, he says, but you will receive power. So who is you? The you are the apostles. And after he had by the Holy Spirit given orders to the apostles whom he had chosen. So this is the you that we see throughout this passage. So the you is apostles. And we see that over here, appearing to them, the apostles, gathering them together, the apostles. And another thing we want to do is look for repeated terms. So things that are repeated are things that the author really wants you to pay attention to. He's repeating this phrase to get your attention. So in this passage, we see again and again the Holy Spirit, that Jesus had by the Holy Spirit given orders to the apostles. And down here, and you'll be baptized with the Holy Spirit. And then later on in our passage here, we have when you receive power by the Holy Spirit. So this is key. He has said the Holy Spirit at least 3 times in 10 verses. That's a big deal. And then we're going to see, so this but is a contrast. You see in verse 8, but you will receive power. That's a contrast. And it's in response to something. So we see this question. So in verse 6, that's the apostles that we identified before, had come together and they were asking him, that's Jesus, Lord, is it at this time? So there's our when question. So they're asking a when question of Jesus. Is it at this time you are restoring the kingdom to Israel? And so verses 7 and 8 are Jesus' response to an answer of their question. So he answers with a negative and then a positive. He says, "It is not for you to know the times which the Father has fixed by his own authority." But there's our contrast. You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you. You'll be my witnesses in both Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria into the uttermost parts of the earth. So remember, when you're making observations, you never study a verse in isolation. You always study your text in context.